For today's program, we're going to take a look at Iceland. This photograph was probably taken close to about midnight when I took that photo in Lake Mývatn area, which was one section that we visited. So this is me in Iceland with my photographic getup. This is what I look like when I'm out in the field. And this is on the island of Flatey, which we'll visit as part of the trip here this evening. Iceland, just some information I pulled offline. Not a lot of people that live there, and again, as you can see from the population there. And when we got out, again past Reykjavik or Keflavik, and you get out into the countryside, which happens pretty quickly, it's pretty sparse, pretty barren, in huge areas, which you'll see as we move forward. In terms of someone like myself or anyone's interested in birds, there's a couple of bird guides for Iceland. This is one of the ones that I would certainly recommend, which I believe is the newer bird guide that's available. And just to kind of orient everybody, of course, here's Iceland up here. When we did our trip to Iceland, we primarily were in the Reykjavik Peninsula up into Mývatn, and then up into the Mývatn region, and then over to the Bird Cliffs and one of the islands, Flatey, which I mentioned earlier. You fly into Keflavik. Reykjavik is the capital. We did spend a little bit of time in Reykjavik, really not much. Again, was not our focus. But we did spend some time in the Reykjavik Peninsula, which in itself was really spectacular. And if you fly into Keflavik and you just wanted to kind of do the Reykjavik Peninsula, that in itself can be a really interesting trip in terms of the scenery, the bird life, and so forth that time of the year, which is what we'll start off at the beginning of the trip. I took this photo because it was one of those things where you get over there and you don't speak the language, of course, and occasionally you're looking for a street sign and it's like, well, forget that because it's just not going to work. Although my friend Jim Sweeney, who you'll hear me mention throughout the program, is a friend of mine here in the Boston area. His uncle lives in Iceland and has lived there for about the last 40 years. He was co-leading the trip with me, and Jim speaks the language to a certain degree, certainly much better than I do, so having Jim with us was really quite nice. Kind of in the Reykjavik Peninsula areas, we were kind of traversing the coastal areas. There were some parks like this one here, which was a heavily nested area for Arctic terns, and so we would just kind of work these areas and kind of figure out where we wanted to photograph as we were kind of driving along. And Arctic terns, again, numerous there. This is really the only tern you see here. Here in Massachusetts, interestingly enough, Plymouth Beach is a location you can occasionally see them. It's the southernmost terminus for Arctic terns here in the Western Hemisphere. Over in Iceland, though, I mean, just by the hundreds and if not thousands, you see Arctic terns. And in fact, in my first 10 minutes in Iceland, I probably saw more Arctic terns than I'd seen in my entire life here in the United States. So just a handful of photos of Arctic terns with their long forked tail. Very vocal, really nice white pale feathers. They're really bright red feet. They're a little shorter and stubbier in their feet in terms of the common terns that we see here in Massachusetts. And as a photographer, one of the things we noticed immediately, and I had kind of seen this with some other friends that had been there before, is in a lot of areas you have this nice scenery in terms of where a lot of the bird species you're seeing. You're seeing some of the photos here where they perch up on these nice rocks with lichens and mosses and these nice grasses and this sort of thing, and it really made for some really wonderful photographs, as you'll see throughout the evening. So the northwest tip of the peninsula, we kind of made our way down here on one of the days of the trip, and kind of right on the tip here. And this is my friend Sam Stahl from Pennsylvania, who was on the trip, and so we were just kind of standing along this walkway here out on the tip, and fulmars were just kind of racing by here, which you'll see some of the photographs in a minute. But the other reason I show you this photograph is it's a little difficult to make out right now, but back here is the only glacier that we actually could see, which is right back here, and I think, yeah, so this is it from across the water. So this is one of the glaciers that we were able to see. We never actually visited any of the glaciers up close, but this was the closest one that we could see from land. As far as the fulmars are concerned, this is a pelagic species that you typically only see out at sea, but these birds are very close to shore and they're nesting all throughout Iceland, and we encountered them almost everywhere we went. I don't do well on boats, so to do these pelagic trips and to be out to sea to try to photograph them was really not possible for me in most cases. So to be able to photograph fulmars from standing on land was quite nice because I didn't have to get 6 shades of green on a boat to encounter them. But they were really just kind of making their way right by that point, one after another, really offering these incredible photographic opportunities. And you'll see on a couple of the other locations that we went to, we had opportunities with fulmars as well. And these are one of the tube nose species. You can see the tube nose up here. Tube nose part of the species of these pelagic birds. So that's where they excrete the salt from the water that they ingest. They're really agile flyers, kind of making their way across the ocean. We did have Arctic skua as well. This is about the best I could do. We never had really great looks at this species, but we did encounter it. In a European golden plover, we do get golden plover over here. This is European golden plover, and again, as a photographer, kind of looking for these nice photographic opportunities, it was really wonderful to be able to photograph this species, and again, to have these nice mosses and lichens and these grasses really kind of help enhance the photograph as we were photographing not just golden plovers, but many of the species, again, as you'll see tonight. I just think the colors really help add to the photo of this plover species, and it is in breeding plumage, which is quite nice instead of that kind of the drabber winter plumage that a lot of these birds tend to have if you see them in their fall and winter plumage. Again, European golden plover, and we encountered them not every place we went, but in many of the locations throughout Iceland, we had European golden plover. We also had whimbrel, which we do see here in Massachusetts as well. And we had some really nice opportunities with whimbrel at a handful of locations there. They have this very long beak, as you can see, for foraging. You see them walking through the grasses, kind of picking insects and other invertebrates out. And this first part, all these photos right now, this is all from the Reykjavik Peninsula. So we haven't even left the Reykjavik Peninsula for this first part of the trip. All these photos are from here. Common ring plover. This looks very much like our semi-palmated sandpiper that we see here in Massachusetts and in the Northeast. And we encountered common ring plover in many of the locations, including Flate Island, which again we'll look at in a little bit. And again, just from a photographic point of view, I would just encounter these birds in certain areas, and you'd say to yourself, wow, I wish the bird would get up on this nice little tuft area here, this rock with all this moss, and all of a sudden the bird would just end up there, and you were just like, oh, this is great, and it kind of happened almost over and over with a lot of the bird species. It was really quite nice. Icelandic horses, ponies, and depending on who you talk to, sometimes people say don't call them ponies, call them horses. I kind of refer to them as both. And in most places we went, we had Icelandic horses. And in fact, a friend of mine had been to Iceland a year and a half before our trip. And one of the things she told me when she got back is she said, remember to spend time photographing the horses. She said, you'll get back and you'll wish you had spent more time photographing the horses. So we did spend 2 or 3 occasions when we had nice opportunities with the horses to photograph them. But sure enough, when I got back and I saw my friend, she said to me, how'd you do with the horses? And I said, I wish I had spent more time photographing the horses. So she was right on with that. The one thing about Icelandic horses, and we'll revisit them in a little bit, if an Icelandic horse leaves, is taken out of Iceland, it can never return. They will not let that horse return. In fact, I have a friend of mine who lives west of Boston who actually kind of inherited an Icelandic horse and took that horse in. And I was talking to him about it, and sure enough, he confirmed that. In fact, we'd run into a couple people from California when we were in the Reykjavik area, and they actually owned Icelandic horses in Iceland and some in California, and they were kind of discussing that as well. Really quite beautiful and stunning animals, and I have some handful of other photos I'll show you that I think are even more interesting than these first 2. kind of making our way out on the peninsula, we encountered this one spot that Jim Sweeney wanted to take us to, and it's called the Hanging Rock. And apparently, what they would do is resources, more than several hundred years ago, were quite sparse, and particularly in terms of lumber. But what they would do is they would place a plank across here, and that's where they would hang people. And so it has become a tourist attraction, if you can imagine. So it was interesting. We went and stopped because it was right on the way to one of the places we were going. Here's my buddy Jim right here. This is his uncle who lives in Iceland, who was helping us with the trip. And this is pretty typical of some of the areas that we encountered on the outer Reykjavik Peninsula. These really large open areas, old volcanic areas. The ocean is right over this ridge right here. We were making our way out to a destination for the end of that particular day. Along the way, one of the geothermal areas that we stopped at, Jim had actually been here a year or two before, and he said all this infrastructure was not here the last time he was there, so that was kind of nice that they had installed this boardwalk, bathroom facilities, and so forth. So they're really, in a lot of the areas we encountered, they're really trying to do a lot to help and encourage in terms of the ecotourism in Iceland. I will tell you, it doesn't smell very good at all. That sulfur, egg smell, whatever. It can be a little overpowering in some of the areas we're at. But it was really interesting to see the ground bubbling and so forth. I have a video I'm going to show in a little bit that will show you a little bit more of that, and kind of you'll be able to hear the sounds of it as well, which I think is interesting. It's one thing to see the photo. I think it's something else to see a video and kind of feel the experience a little bit more. And just another area, kind of moving down the road again, away from that geothermal area, and it seemed like we couldn't drive 10 or 15 minutes without someone saying pull over, we want to take a photo of whatever it is. Iceland is just stunning. I dare say you could blindfold yourself and stick a camera out the window and take a picture and be really satisfied with what you get. The geographic formations, the mountains, the lakes, the waterfalls, it's stunning. One great scene after another. Just to kind of give you a little flavor of what we were seeing along this trip on the outer Reykjavik Peninsula. So we finally made our way kind of down to the tip here, and this map here, which I took off of Google Earth, this little rock right here, this Elderly Rock, is the third largest northern gannet colony in the world, and you could see it from shore. And there was another, this little dot right here, this other little rock off of here, that is another colony, and you'll see this in a second. So this is us at the tip photographing. This is towards the end of the day, and as we arrived, there was this family there was one picnic table, and it's kind of a fairly remote area. There's a lighthouse behind us, but there was a picnic table just sitting there, and which was kind of odd that this picnic table was just kind of in the middle of nowhere. And this family, I believe they were from England, was parked there, and they were making their dinner. They were going to have a dinner out there, and which in itself I guess is not so odd, except they were making pasta. And I don't know what this was all about. They were making this pasta dinner. They were boiling water, and they were going to have this pasta dinner anyway. The gentleman says, "Hey, I think they're seeing some whales over there, they're being here." So I said, "Oh, we'll go out and check it out." We're thinking humpback whales or whatever. So anyway, we make our way out to this point, and we look. This is another rock I was telling you about. It has all this white up here is this huge colony of nesting birds as well. But anyway, these are razorbills flying by. So we get out, and we're kind of looking out on the water and scanning, and very quickly we realize the whales they're talking about are actually killer whales, orcas. And not just one. We probably had somewhere between 20 and 30 whales making their way in these waters. You can see two here. There's 3, 1, 2, 3. And this was going on. We spent probably 3 hours at this spot, and there were some other nesting birds and some other things to photograph here. But this was really just spectacular. Again, I don't do well on boats. I'd never seen killer whale in the wild, so to be able to kind of check that off my marine mammal list was quite nice to see this, and it was spectacular. My buddy Scott, who you saw in that photo, he was completely enamored with it, and he spent more time than any of us there. His finger never left the shutter. Every time I turned around, I just heard click, 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 click. He was just like ripping them off one after another. They were a little far out, but not too bad. We got great views. You could see them naked eye and with binoculars quite well, and we got a handful of these type of photos. This is a photo from my friend Nancy, who was on the trip with us, and so That's most of our group there, kind of looking out. And again, this is probably about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night that we were there photographing. And just I think one more there, I think. Yeah. So that's kind of a look at the Reykjavik Peninsula. Again, the nice thing about that area is if you fly into Keflavik, you can just do that on your own very quickly, and really enjoy Iceland very quickly with relative ease. So the next area that I want to cover is the Minar region. So again, we fly into Reykjavik. Keflavik. Here's Reykjavik. We stayed in Arkanes up here, and because we were going to do this area in here, when you can see all the roads, you can just kind of do these loops, which is what we did. We would just travel, do these loops, find the different areas we wanted to photograph, and we would spend time there, and worked out quite well. And so as long as you got a decent map, and they're all the roads are numbered, they're paved pretty well for the most part. It's pretty easy to get around. And again, we stayed in Arkanes. I do not recommend staying in Arkanes, however. And I'll explain that in a minute. And this, again, just kind of gives you an idea what we were doing. Yes, we traversed this as well many times. And again, this just gives you a closer look up. So as what we would do, we would just kind of do these loops, and just, again, you're just kind of just looking for whatever it is you want to photograph as you're just kind of just traveling these roads. We had a general idea of what it was going to be like, and Jim had been to some of these places. So this is kind of the center of Arkanes, a nice little Icelandic town. And the thing I noticed immediately as we pulled into the town, this is the main drag coming in here, is they're setting up these streamers and banners and so forth, and you can kind of make out this is a leprechaun here, and they have them in orange and in green. I don't think you can see in the green ones. And I'm like, what's going on here? Well, it turns out they were having their Irish festival that weekend. So we were arriving on a Thursday, and then that Friday and Saturday night was the Irish festival. My name is Shawn Patrick Carey. I have Irish descent on my family. Oh, this is going to be great, the Irish festival. Nothing against the Irish. Don't go there unless you really want to partake in the Irish festival. We were photographers, so the Irish festival starts at midnight and goes till 4 in the morning. We were coming home at midnight and trying to sleep so we could get up to photograph the next morning. So it didn't work out so well for us in terms of that, and it was pretty loud and ruckus. But it's a really interesting little seaport. Some of these ships, and it's kind of tough to get the scale, but these ships are absolutely enormous back here. And I kind of walked this area in here, and it was quite interesting. And of course, you can't go to Iceland without going to a Viking restaurant, which we did. But the focus of the trip, again, was birds. We did have oyster catcher there, Eurasian oyster catcher, which looks very similar to the oyster catcher we see here in Massachusetts. Not exactly the same, but very close. But one of the other interesting things, very quickly, that we started noticing is that the number of birds that we were running into that were banded. And you'll see this on a number of photographs coming up. And as I started talking to Jim about this, there's not a huge population there. There's not a lot of bird watchers there, but yet there's a lot of these birds that are being banded. So clearly there are people that are very active in the research there and banning procedures and that sort of thing in Iceland, which I thought was rather interesting. And again, European golden plover again had them throughout the Minar region here. And then black-tailed godwits, which was really a real treat for me, not just for me, but for the entire group. And again, just the idea that you would see these rocks and other areas for these birds to kind of perch up on, and you would see them, and sure enough, you go, wow, if that bird just landed right there, that would make a great photo. And then sure enough, there it was. And the beautiful light that we had, you had different plumages on these birds, and as you'll see here in a little bit. Another one here, kind of a duller plumage. We did have red-throated loon, nesting red-throated loon. In fact, this one little pond or small lake that we came upon, I believe it was the second day we were there. There were probably a dozen to 15 red-throated loons, and we were able to see a handful of nests, including this one that was right next to the road. So we're on the road standing next to our vehicle photographing this. So it's not like we approached this loon. We didn't want to disturb it off its nest. It had chose to nest that close to the road. And in fact, there was a second one that was across the water. This is the other nest that we were able to see. And then my friend Nancy, I think I have my friend Nancy gave me this photo that she took, which I wish I had taken this photo as well, because it really kind of shows the area a little bit better. So the road is right here, right? So that first loon nest, was right off, it kind of went like this, was right off the road here. The second nest, this photo here, is that bird right there. And there's another one right here swimming. And throughout this small lake, pond, whatever you want to call it, like I said, we probably had a dozen to 15 red-throated loons. So, and unfortunately, that particular day, the first 2 days of the trip, it was extremely windy. It was probably, a 30-mile-an-hour wind constant, and it was gusting to 40, 45 miles an hour. So it made it very difficult for the photography. So we kind of just hunkered near the van to kind of, as a windshield, to get some of these photographs of these loons. But this was really the only place where we were able to encounter red-throated loon and photograph them, but it worked out quite nicely. And again, just kind of making our way along different areas in the Minar region, we came across this old lava field, which I thought was particularly interesting in just how it looked. And it's this moss that has kind of grown over these rocks. It's really soft and spongy. And my friend Scott, I think that's the next picture. Let's see. Yeah, decides he wants to go up and get his photo there. But prior to him standing, what he did is he actually sat on this rock here. And before he could do that, Jim said, "Don't sit down," and it was too late. What we didn't know, it was a little too late, is that these rocks are actually very sharp. And Scott actually ripped the back of his pants open. And I probably should have had him turn around and take that photo as well, but I didn't do that. So, but it was really kind of interesting. Again, just the scenery that you encountered there. And again, this is just kind of just driving along and just oh, look at that. Let's photograph that. And just from the vehicle itself, just a couple of quick grab shots, just to kind of give you the sense of kind of what the landscape looks like as you're traveling through Iceland. That time of the year, things are very lush and green, and the wildflowers and so forth, and you still have snow on the sides of the mountains, and these are huge mountains, as you can imagine. I mean, it's just spectacular, and just one waterfall after another that you would encounter. Here's one of the waterfalls here. And again, this is just driving and just kind of, I don't want to say stumbling across it, but in a way stumbling across it. And you could spend, your entire trip just saying, forget about the birds. I just want to photograph, this landscape. And again, we only were concentrated on a small part of Iceland. We didn't even go into the interior.
Excuse me.
Yes.
This is in July, right?
This is July. This is all July. Yep. So 24-hour sunlight. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a great question. I do get that quite a bit. So the temperature varied depending on where we were. I would say the average was around 50. It certainly was lower, a little bit lower in some areas, and particularly when you see us going out to Flate, which is one of the next places we're going to visit. We got on the boat. It was definitely cooler. When we were in the Lake Mivot area, which we'll see in a little bit, we had probably the highest temperature was about 65, 68 degrees, not quite 70. We were in t-shirts that day, so that was nice. But I would say the average was probably somewhere between 50 and 55 for most of the areas, not all. There's a term for this type of dormant volcano, or actually it's not even dormant volcano. I forget what the word is. I should actually know it. But anyway, we had stopped here a couple times. Jim had pointed this out to us. You can see the path here. There's two people right up there that had just hiked it. And Jim said he had done this with his uncle many years ago. In fact, when Jim graduated from high school, he actually spent a summer there. He said the going up is really not the issue. It's the coming down. Because it's like this, I can't even explain. I should have brought it. I actually got a little bit of this volcanic gravel. I brought it home with me. It's small pieces like this, but you can imagine many small pieces like this. You just can't get your footing, and it's very difficult, apparently, kind of coming down without, gravity just wanting to tumble you off the side of this thing. So that's the difficult part. So he said a lot of people, kind of start making their way up, and it's a little difficult making your way up, and then all of a sudden you get up there and you realize, oh no, I have to go back down. So we didn't stick around to see what happened with those folks. Many of the rivers and streams and so forth that we encountered along the way were interesting places that we would stop because we were also looking for nesting harlequin ducks, which we did encounter a little bit later. I'll show you, but we did have a large group of them in one area, although they weren't nesting. And you see these males and this one juvenile male in here, all kind of parading along. And what they're doing is they're making their way to where the females are. And these are the females here, and the males, as you can see, all trying to gather their attention because they would, I think, like to mate with them. Well, needless to say, the time that we spent there, these females were completely unimpressed with any of these males. They were having none of it. But it was nice to see large numbers of them. A little bit later in the trip, which you'll see, we did encounter a female up close, and I have some video of it, and we had some young hatched birds, although I didn't get any photos of them, unfortunately. Nancy gave this photo to me as well, which I've been using in my presentation. So this just gives you an idea. As our group was traveling, we would get to certain areas, we would find something we want to photograph in terms of a bird species. We would jump out of the car. We had something we call code red. So when someone saw something, they'd yell out code red, and Jim would stop the vehicle. We'd all jump out with our cameras and find whatever it is we want to photograph. In this case, we had this golden plover. Even though it was a little far away, I really like this photo a lot because I think with some bird photographers, and I'm guilty of this myself, they want these frame-filling photos of the bird, right? Which is nice, but I think a photo like this, and I have I think a couple in this series, that are nice in that it gives you a little more sense of the environment and scale. So you really kind of get a sense of the bird in its environment. Not to mention the fact, again, I just love the colors, the mosses, the lichens, the grass, the color down here. I just think it really adds to a very nice photo to tell more of a story in terms of this bird species and again, and its environment and where it's living at that time of the year. As opposed to, and again, I'm guilty of this, these frame-filling photos, and you're going to see more of those. But I do like this photo a lot. And this one as well, this whimwhirl, really off in the distance, but I love this photo in this really warm light, kind of just, the sense of scale of this shorebird, which is a larger shorebird, but in this sense, you kind of get an idea of, wow, look at this bird in its environment, and this is where they're nesting at this time of year, right? This is where they're raising their young. And keep in mind with shorebirds, unlike this time of year, how many people have robins nesting in and around their yards right now, right? You probably had robins at one point, right? So you'll see the male and female robin are bringing back the food for the young, right? That doesn't work like this with shorebirds. When shorebirds hatch, they're on their own. The parents kind of look over them a little bit, but they're not feeding them. The little shorebirds go out and they have to fend for themselves and feed themselves. So it's a very different kind of dynamic in terms of evolutionary biology, in terms of how these birds have evolved. And again, nice photo of this whimwhirl. I sound like a broken record at this point, but the idea of seeing just this structure of this rock and the moss and the lichens and the grass and thinking, wow, it'd be great if that whimwhirl were there, and then sure enough, the bird just decides that that's where it's going to go and kind of stand up for us and announce itself for these really wonderful photographs that we were able to get. This nice warm light, and the light was changing, really minute for minute. You'd have these overcast and drizzle and rain, and then the clouds would clear, and this depending on the time of the day, because the angle of the sun was very low, you get this wonderful light. I as a photographer, you just almost couldn't believe what you were seeing. This is one of the few kind of small nesting birds that they have here, this pipit. Whooper swan. So we made our way down this one particular road, again, just making our way and trying to figure out what we wanted to photograph. And we came across this area, this kind of like this farmhouse and this barn. And off in this field, in this one area, we had these whooper swans. Which was great. We were hoping to see it and kind of get it on our list. This is not really a swan that we really see here in New England. And black-tailed god. So now we just stop and then this one area, about maybe 30 yards. This is what we're seeing right now. So godwits, the swans, whimbrel, and redshank. So we haven't shown you redshank, so common redshank. So there's this little depression in front of us, this little wet area you can see here. And so we have these common redshanks down there. And again, this is not a species we see here in New England. And so we're kind of watching these redshanks, and this one in particular seems to be a little more agitated than usual. Well, we realized what was going on pretty quickly. It had a baby that was there. And this bird, Jim and I were talking about this later. This bird was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 days old would be our guess, something like that. And it was just kind of making her way in this little wet depression area, just feeding. So the parents, so again, we're up on the road, so it's not like we're kind of down there trying to disturb them. And after a little while, the parents calmed down a little bit and realized that we weren't necessarily a threat to their baby. And we only saw the one, which I thought was a little unusual. Yes?
How far away are you taking the photograph?
So depending on the bird species, because the size of the bird, right? So that's a really tiny bird. We're talking probably that big, right? So that bird is probably where the wall is, and we're probably standing about here. Okay, so it's not like I mean, we're close, but it's not like we're right up on it. We have large telephoto lenses, 600 millimeter lenses, most of us. So the thing about these redshanks too. Anywhere we went in this particular area, there was this fence post that was right behind that little wet area, and they loved to tee up on these fence posts and announce themselves. Almost everywhere we went. The thing about redshanks, we realized pretty quickly, anywhere in Iceland, when you got out of your vehicle, if there was a redshank, immediately, if there was a redshank anywhere in the area, it would find the highest spot, land on it, and announce that they did not like you being there. So as we're kind of photographing this little baby redshank and the parents, my friend Dr. Carl decides to kind of wander down. Again, he's not very far, maybe 15, 20 yards from us down the road, and he encounters something. We don't know what it is at first, because he turns to us and says, "Hey, you guys got to get down here. I've got something. I'm not sure what it is." Carl's not as experienced a birder as myself and Jim. So Jim makes his way down to see what Carl has stumbled upon, and Jim turns to myself and the rest of the group and says, "Code red." And so he immediately, "Oh, code red, so what's going on?" So we get up, and sure enough, there's this female ptarmigan there, as well as a male. And this was really, really a nice treat. So this is all within, again, this one small area, within a half an hour, we're photographing all these species in this one area. And to be able to photograph ptarmigan this close, and these birds were very close. They were probably from myself to that wall, maybe even closer. Just kind of forging their way around, and I talked to Jim after this because they finally just kind of wandered their way off. Jim had not anticipated that we would see this bird species in this particular area. It wasn't something that he thought the habitat was quite right. He thought we would see it in other areas, which we did, but we never had an opportunity to photograph it like we did these two. So for that, we were really happy. We kind of left that area, kind of made our way down to another area, and this is probably, I don't know, an hour or two later, we come across two different places where we stopped to photograph Icelandic horses, these three in particular, which are really interesting looking. Just, I don't know, there was just something about them.
Are they just called Icelandic horses?
Icelandic horses, that's as I know them, yep. Yeah. And again, when you're traveling almost anywhere in Iceland, you just look off, and it's like all of a sudden, oh, there's some there, And so, but the interesting thing about them, and we'll get to this here with this series of photos, as we pulled up to this area, the horses at first were back up by this barn. The road is down here. This is Carl, Dr. Carl, right here. So as we got out, we weren't intending on photographing these horses at first. We were just kind of looking at the area and the landscape and so on and so forth. But the thing we realized about these Icelandic horses is that when you get out of your vehicle, I think two things is happening. One, I think in some areas, particular areas where they encounter people a little bit more, particularly tourists, they know that if they make their way down to where the people are, they might get a treat, right? So they've kind of figured that out. And the other thing is they're just curious, because they're not very, some horses can be aggressive and nippy and that sort of thing. Icelandic horses, really, at least the ones we encountered, they're not like that. They're really just, they're very mellow, And so these three horses immediately just kind of made their way down to us, right to the fence line here, and they were just, okay, we're hanging out with you, And so we just spent, I don't know, probably almost an hour with these horses, photographing them. I have some video that I took, and I'm going to show you a video in a little bit. And it was really, really interesting, and I'm glad we spent that time with them. And then we made our way to a couple other areas. This is another photo I took. This is actually on a different day. I think it looked better as a black and white. That's why I converted it. I love this one looking up over the top of the rest of them here. And actually, in the video I'm going to show you, you'll see these particular horses. So then that first group where Dr. Carl was, we made our way another day, second day, or the third day that we were in that area, and encountered this other group of Icelandic horses. And in this case, we found them in various morphs or color phases, or morphs, I guess, white and black and tan and so on and so forth. And you can see this group they were far off. And again, we got out of the vehicle and immediately they're like, oh, there's people. Let's make our way over there. And sure enough, they're very curious and they start kind of making their way towards you. And it's really beautiful, beautiful animals. And there was this little stream, and the group kind of made their way down towards the stream. And unfortunately, I had my large 600 millimeter lens with me, and my smaller lens was in the vehicle. And I'm taking these photos, and I realized at one point, oh no, I've got the wrong lens, because they started crossing the stream in the area where they came right down in here. I was too close. I was getting these frame-filling photographs, and I clipped a bunch of them. I got some nice ones, but I wish I had a different lens. But nonetheless, it was interesting to kind of get them crossing the stream. I think it kind of enhances the photo a little bit. So that's it for the Minar region. And again, not that far a journey once you're in either Reykjavik or Keflavik area. We made our way on another part of the trip up to the up to the Lake Mývatn, the Mývatn area. This is the lake right here. And kind of traversing down this area here and into the lake, and then we stayed a couple days here. And the reason I show you this, another reason I show you this map, because again, you can just see you can do this loop around the lake here and so forth. This area here, and you can see the geographic formation here, this very brown area here. I'm going to show you a couple photos that are going to be from that area, and you'll get a sense of what it looks like. And it's just a wider view of it here. So this is the vehicle that we took, and this is Peter. He and his wife Nancy were on the trip, and so Peter was in charge of packing the van each location, because everyone had to have a job and know what to do and so on and so forth. So Peter knew where everything went, and he knew at what order it had to go in the vehicle. And once it was packed, you couldn't fit so much as a guitar pick in there, I think, when it was done. But that was Peter's job. He took that on pretty quickly. So it was like, okay, Peter is the guy packing the vehicle. So I will tell you on this trip, one of the more expensive parts of the trip actually is the rental of the vehicle and the fuel. The fuel cost when we were there, they sell it by the liter, but the equivalent as it worked out was somewhere approaching $7 a gallon for the fuel. Of course, there were 7 of us total, 6 of us picking up the tab, so you divide it over 6 people, it wasn't so bad. The rental of the vehicle was fairly expensive as well, but those were 2 of the bigger expenses. The flight over, by the way, you leave at 9 o'clock at night from Logan. It's a 5-hour flight. It's not a long flight at all. Icelandic Air is a wonderful airline. Can't say enough about Icelandic Air. And that all went very smoothly. So, and the round trip flight for us, I think, was right around $1,000 round trip, $1,100, something like that. So not very expensive, really. But again, the vehicle rental and the fuel was one of the more expensive things as part of the expenses for the trip. So Commongall, and we had, as we were approaching Lake Mývatn, there was another area just before that. And black-headed gull, which looks a little bit like a laughing gull that we get here. Different species, looks a little bit like it, but you had laughing gull and common gull. And Goddess Foss, which is this large waterfall that Jim decided to take us to. And I have a little note here, and I want to take a look at this. So this Goddess Falls I'm reading from what Jim wrote. It's a large waterfall west of Lake Mývatn that got its name from a local chieftain throwing his pagan idol into the falls when Christianity was decreed to be the new religion of Iceland around the year 1000. So there is thought to be this, this thing that he threw in, this idol that he threw in there. And anyway, it's this huge attraction for tourists, as you can imagine. It's a really interesting waterfall, and I have a little bit of a video showing a little bit of this. Kind of just a couple different views, and you can view it from both sides here, and then this side here, and you can see someone over on this side here. So as a photographer, though, the difficulty that I found pretty quickly is that, and this is the part, you literally just drive right up, the parking lot's right here, you get out of your car, and you're right there. So there's no long walk you have to make to see it. And then down here is this, I think it's a little rest stop gas station. You get a bite to eat and souvenirs and that sort of thing, and you can walk from there up to the other side. The problem was, and depending on where you were trying to stand to get a nice photograph of just the falls, is you have all these people, right? So, you can see, right, all these people, and even us, right, we're getting our picture. So if you want to get this nice photo of the falls, it's difficult because there's all these people. So unless you get there, I don't know, really early in the morning or wait until, all the folks have left, it can be a little difficult to photograph just the falls. One of the geothermal areas that we encountered, and there was a handful throughout the country. And keep in mind, in Iceland, this is how folks heat their homes in terms of getting their power and so forth. So Jim's uncle, we were talking about it, and he said, even though the price of fuel for their vehicles is, between $6 and $7 a gallon, his bill for electricity and heating his home or his apartment that he lives in is a very large apartment, was $15 a month. So there's kind of this offset there, I guess, and you'll get it all from geothermal. And yes, the water is and can be very hot. So it's interesting. Occasionally, you see people want to go over and stick their hand in some areas. You want to be very careful about that. So this is that area I was telling you. I showed you on that map, and that kind of that brown areas we're coming through the valley. This is it. This is what it looks like. And there's all these lupins that are in bloom, and lupins are actually introduced to help, I guess, control erosion. So they're not native to Iceland, but you get these, as you can see, it just kind of goes on forever. And I think there's another one. My buddy Scott here, just to kind of give you a sense of scale. This huge valley that kind of ran up through here, that area I showed you on the map. But as we made our way again to Lake Mevat area, some of the areas we were looking for, again, for bird species, we had common ring plover, again with godwit. Had them foraging in the grasses, probably nesting somewhere nearby. Again, finding that nice rock to sit up on to get a nice photo of, which was great. This was one we particularly wanted. This bird was kind of behind this little tuft a little bit, and we were kind of standing on the road waiting, and sure enough, I was like, boy, if it just made its way up there, this would really make for a nice photo with the background and so forth. And sure enough, the bird made it right up on this little mound, kind of announced itself. We got some nice photos of it. Another photo that Nancy provided. So we stayed at this. It's kind of interesting in Iceland when you kind of get into these very remote areas. This, and I should have taken maybe some photos of where we stayed. It's a little hard to describe, but there's this this structure. There's another one on the other side, and then right in the middle is an area that's like a common kitchen area. Then there's some bathrooms and so forth. So you had these bunks that you would stay in here, and so that's where we were staying. So not very plush accommodations, but it was very nice. But this is the group minus Nancy. She's taking the photo. But when you get to Lake Mevat and some of the areas of the overlooks, this is one of them. And again, this is probably taken, probably approaching 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. You can see just how gorgeous the surrounding area is. And you can see why they call it the land of the midnight sun, because this was probably taken close to midnight. But we did encounter Arctic tern here, which I thought was interesting. I wasn't expecting to see Arctic tern in this area. And then this is the female Harlequin duck. And again, I'm going to show a video in a little bit that's going to show you this female. And keep in mind with Harlequin ducks, they nest in and around very turbulent water. And so when you see the video, you're going to see how turbulent this water is. And it's like, why is that duck in that water? But that's the type of habitat that they prefer. And again, you'll see that in a little bit. A horn grebe was one of the ones that we were really looking forward to seeing here in breeding plumage. We see them here in Massachusetts in the late fall, winter, sometimes early spring, although probably getting a little too late for them now. But we don't see them in this breeding plumage, and they're quite stunning in breeding plumage. And we encounter them on several of the different areas in the Lake Meevat area. And then Barrow's goldeneye, both female and male. We only had one opportunity with them. It wasn't great, but we did see them. And then tufted duck. This is not a duck that we really see here much in Massachusetts, but we did have a handful of these tufted ducks in this one area, including a whole bunch of baby tufted ducks, which was really kind of cool. And it was nice because there was a handful of them kind of swimming around this one area, feeding and so forth. And there were 2 or 3 females that were kind of watching over all these young ducklings, kind of keeping track of them. And at first I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. You've got all these young ducklings there. But that was right near where this horned grebe nest was, and we could barely see the nest. You really couldn't photograph them, but there was this pair of horned grebes that were there, and they were kind of curious. And again, we have these little travel stools, and we just set them down right next to the shore, and we're sitting there I think we were there for probably 3 or 4 hours photographing them. Just a handful of photos of the grebes, but then at one point, I start noticing that I believe it was the male starts chasing down these young ducklings to the point where on more than a handful of occasions it would grab them, and clearly it was trying to kill them because they were in its territory. So what would happen is, now I realize why there was all these baby ducklings and just this handful of females kind of watching over them, because what would happen is the females then would see this, and the females are much larger than these horned grebes, would come racing in to chase off the horned grebe. I could never get that photo. Try as hard as I want, I could not get that photo because it would just happen so quickly. So we never saw them actually kill one of the ducklings, and what would happen is, after this little encounter and it would grab it by its neck, the little duckling would kind of shake it off and forget about it and just go about its business and start feeding again. So we're sitting just right here, basically. It was almost where the shoreline. So that's where we're sitting, taking all those photos of the grebes and the ducks. So we're that close to the road. There was a parking area up here. This couple little restaurants up here, and it was a little, I don't know, kind of compare it to almost like a state park or something. And I hear this noise coming down the road, and I have my point and shoot camera with me, luckily. And as I turn around and look, the horses are racing up the road here. And I got a couple of shots, and this is one of them. And these Icelandic horses have a particular gait, the way that they run, and you can look it up online. It's kind of interesting. Wagtails we had here in one of the fields right next to where we were sitting. And then the end of the day, you have to find some place to eat. And there were only a handful of options in this area. And I remembered we had driven past this pizza place. And so I said to Jim, I said, oh, because you lose track of time, right? Because it's 24-hour daylight. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, it's not dinner time, it's past dinner time. And not only is it past dinner time, you have to think about where you're going to go and eat. So I said to Jim, I said, how far are we from that pizza place I saw? He said, yeah, I think it's right down the road. We can get there. So sure enough, we make our way over there, and we grab a pizza, and this is our group. Here's an old volcano back here. And this pizza place, this area, you can rent little cabins, you can pitch your tent. A lot of people, are traveling throughout Iceland on bikes and motorcycles and pitching tents. And I mean, it's really, folks are really into it over there. But anyway, so we got our pizza as a group and so forth, and the pizza was actually pretty good. So you're probably wondering, why am I showing you this? Well, it got me to thinking about the people that decided to put this little pizzeria right here. And so this is just me kind of, just kind of going with it. So it's like, I imagine it as this couple, thinking about starting a business, and one of them says to the other, hey, I think we should open up a pizzeria. Yeah, where do you think we should do that? I'm thinking near this old volcano near Lake Meevat. That would be the ideal place to put it. There's no other pizza places. We won't have any competition, and I think it'll be a success. Well, I have to tell you, the pizza was really good, number one. And number two, the following year, a friend of mine, Mike Militia, was going to this area. He had never been there. And he remembered me talking about it. He said, yeah, I got to go to that pizza place. Where is that? I told him where it was and so forth. So I get an email from him when he shows up at this pizza place, the one night, and he sends his email and says, Lake Mevat, having pizza, thanks. And I knew, exactly where he was. So if you find your way there, that's where you want to eat. So just a handful of photos just to kind of show you, again, just some of just what the scenery kind of looks like. These vast areas. And again, this is just traveling anywhere in Iceland when we went, just stopping and just saying that's where we want to photograph for a few minutes. This is my buddy Scott, who lives I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania. My buddy Scott lives there. He and I have known each other since kindergarten, and so to be able to take this trip with the friend I've known my entire life was really quite nice. There's Scott kind of getting all the tripods lined up for Peter to put in the vehicle. Again, just a random waterfalls we found. We decided to get a group shot. And so that's that. There are very few trees. Lake Mevat was one of the few areas where we had a couple areas where there are, they've, I don't know how many, more than hundreds, thousands of years ago, when people first started settling Iceland, what trees were there were cut down. It was heavily deforested because that's what they needed for fuel, for building homes, and so on and so forth. So there are not many trees. They have slowly tried to replant in areas trees that they think were native to Iceland. But yeah, there are not a lot of trees there. That's one thing you do not encounter a lot of. So one of the other places we visited was this island called Flate, which was not initially on our agenda, but my buddy Mike, who I was telling you about that went to this pizza place the following year, told us about it, so we put it on our itinerary. So you go to this town here, which I cannot pronounce, and I'll butcher it. It's Stekenhofen or something of that nature. But anyway, you make your way out to Flate. This is the island of Flate, which is tiny. You could probably traverse the whole thing in about a half an hour. But you have to take a ferry to get there. And remember, I don't do well on boats. So it's not a particularly large ferry either, but this is the boat that we get on. My friend Nancy and Peter down here, and you depart, and you can see how we're dressed right away. So it's a little chilly that day, and you're close to the ocean, and it's going to get even a little bit colder. And we make our way out. The vehicles are on the back of the ferry. However, our vehicle is not on the ferry. We're spending the day. We took the first ferry out, and we're going to take the last ferry off the island. You cannot take your vehicle onto the island. So they only transport your vehicle to get to the other side, which is where ultimately we were going. So at the end of the day, when we got off the ferry to take us to where we were going to the bird cliffs, that's where our vehicle was. But along the way, just out making this 2-hour, a little over 2-hour ferry ride to Flate, again, fulmars just whipping past, and in some cases just kind of just gliding off. You could almost reach out and touch them. And then at one point, someone yells out puffins, and off the side of the boat, sure enough, just hundreds and hundreds of puffins just making their way by. It was really quite spectacular. I'm not sure where in the area they were nesting, because this is nesting season for these birds, so clearly there's some place near there where these birds are nesting. Where that was, I'm not sure. It wasn't Flate, I can tell you that. This is a group of women we met from Denmark who were going to Flate to spend the day, do the exact same thing that we were doing. They were bird watchers and photographers. They were going to spend the day there photographing. So there was a handful of us that were going out to do this for the day. We were approaching Flate. This is just one of the islands off of Flate. This is the island of Flate as you get closer. I like the architecture of the buildings and the way the different colors. I think it really makes for an interesting photograph, and then with the mountains way in the background there. And then I saw this pretty quickly, these two young people that came out from this home. And I have a large telephoto lens, so I took this photo. But the thing that caught my eye is they don't look particularly happy. So I don't know if living on Flate was bumming them out or what the deal was. But it doesn't look like a very spacious or roomy home that they're living in. And I can imagine if you live there year-round, boy, that would be a little tough. But nonetheless, the island's pretty interesting. This is the area where you dock into. There's a place to grab something to eat in here, and there's another small inn you can get something to eat, and you can actually stay in the island, which I would love to do someday. But fulmars, again, in and around the dock area, and very quickly, one of the things I realized in Flate is there's a lot of banding going on. And here you have a banded fulmar right here. So clearly someone's out here banding these birds. In this case, these birds are fighting over some of the scraps that the fishermen are throwing out. And these are fairly large birds, by the way. You know, these are larger than most of the gulls that we see here in Massachusetts. And redshank again, and another banded bird. 2 species banded right here, right? Wagtails, right in and around the rocks. This is, I get off the boat, and within, the first 15, 20 minutes, this is what I'm seeing and photographing. I haven't even gotten to what is the good stuff, really. But the wagtails were quite nice, kind of hanging around the rocks. And a young one, and another young one, which is banded. And so, since this is a fledgling bird, someone very recently had been on that island and banded that bird. That had taken place probably within, a week, 10 days, 2 weeks of when I arrived there. So there's definitely some banding that's going on here.
So Shawn, no land-based birds of prey there?
There are. We had short-eared owl on 3 occasions. I never got any photographs of them. And we did see gerfalcon once, a flyby.
So nothing like a hawk coming in, nothing deep, red.
No. Although there are, I forget what species of eagle is there. We didn't encounter, but the 2 birds of prey that we encountered were short-eared owl. Again, we had 3 of them, and gerfalcon once. Yeah. So meadow pipit, and keep in mind, and I actually have a note here. Let me just run this by you. So. In Iceland, there are 72 breeding bird species. So we're not, and this is not the Central America or Costa Rica or Brazil. We're not talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of species of birds. There's only 72 breeding bird species. There's only 9 perching bird species. This being one of them, meadow pipit. And we had 67 birds on our list for the trip. So we had 67 species in Iceland, and there's only 72 breeding species. So we did pretty good. We didn't photograph all 67 species, but we saw 67 species. And towards the end of the day on Flate, I saw this bird kind of off on this little gravel path, kind of feeding. I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. It's a dull-looking bird, but I'm going to take a couple photos of it. I didn't even know what it was. And in fact, when I got home and I looked it up in the bird guide, I still couldn't find it because no photo of this bird appears in this plumage because this is a fledgling bird. It's something that we see here in Massachusetts only typically during the winter. It's a snow bunting. I never photographed any of the adult birds, only this one, and so it was nice to be able at least to photograph a fledgling bird, a young bird, which I thought was kind of interesting. But again, I couldn't ID it at first. I was like, something's not making. And anyway, I sent it off to Jim Sweeney, and immediately he told me what it was. But again, in terms of the island and just the views, the lighting, just really interesting. Lots of sheep. That's the other thing you see throughout Iceland. Lots of sheep, and on the island there were quite a few of them. And they're just kind of just roaming about, whatever. Even when you're, just traveling, they can cross the road. In many areas, the areas aren't fenced in at all. Gray lag goose, we had that on the island as well, which was nice. So just to kind of give you an idea here, again, so here's some of the sheep that are here. So you kind of just there's a path, kind of runs right here, and we're kind of working the edge of the island. That's the far edge there. This little cove was very nice. There's a whole series of photos I'll show you right now, and Carl's right here. And so there's some nesting fulmars right up here you can see. Just looking down, it's not a great photo, but just to show you, we had all of these fowl ropes that were down here. There's an Arctic tern going by. There's a very large Arctic tern colony on the island. However, that Arctic tern colony that year completely failed. Almost no fledged birds out of the island because in many areas, in some areas, I should say, in Iceland, they're having issues in terms of these failures in these nesting colonies, not just for these terns, but even for puffin production in terms of new fledglings, because they're not finding the food supply that they need. What's going on with that? Hard to say, but at the moment, there's some concern there. But again, right off the edge here, fulmars. Really interesting with these fulmars flying around right in front of you. You can reach out and grab them. just standing on the cliff, just kind of working there. And so these areas where they're nesting. And so what these birds are doing here is as another fulmar flies by, they kind of announce to that fulmar, get away from me. That's what's going on here. And kind of looking down in that little cove again. This is a little inn that you can actually stay in if you're on the island of Flate, and we ran into a couple people that were staying there. My buddy Mike, who's been there before, has stayed there. And in fact, I think he's going back there this year. So we decided to spend some time just in this cove photographing. So here's a handful of photos from there. So common eider, which we do have here in Massachusetts. In fact, they nest right in Boston Harbor. But over here we had this female with some young nestlings. Again, just off from this little cove, ring plover, red shank, another red shank that's banded, right? So that other red shank that was a banded bird was near the dock, so I'm nowhere near. So this is a separate bird that's banded. There's another one that's banded. And then redneck phalaropes. And this is one of the reasons we went here, because we knew there was a large population of nesting redneck phalaropes there. And so you had them in various plumages. You wanted to try to kind of get this more brilliant plumage. But you had various plumages here that was taking place, males and females, young birds, adults. And this is a difficult bird to photograph unless you're in the right area. So it was nice to be able to have an opportunities with these phalaropes. And they are a shorebird, even though they're out swimming around in the water. They're actually a shorebird. But Jim says to me at one point, "Hey, you got to leave. You got to come over here right away." He had a red phalarope. So as a birder, as a bird photographer, a red phalarope trumps a red phalarope. So immediately I have to run and go. This is the only one we saw. And this is not something that you see many on the island, although this is a place you could see them. But you had to go down this rather treacherous, I don't even want to call it a path, these rocks and so forth, to get down close enough to the water to be able to photograph. But I was like, I am not missing this opportunity. I'm going to do it. And I had to be very careful getting down there. But once I got down there, I got some really nice photographs of it. It was out there feeding in the water right off the shore. Really stunning looking bird. And the thing about phalaropes, unlike a lot of bird species with phalaropes, it's the females that are more colorful. In many bird species, it's the male that's more colorful. With the phalaropes, it's the females more colorful. And so this was really a treat. So this phalarope, and who knows how long it had been there, and Jim had seen it and then finally come over and got me. So by the time I got down there and photographed it, I only had so much time with it. There were some guillemots that were in there feeding as well, and typically here in Massachusetts, we don't see them in this breeding plumage. When you see them in their dull winter plumage. So this was another nice treat to be able to get these guillemots as well. And I think the whole thing in terms of this phalarope and so forth was, the opportunity I had was 20 minutes at most before some sort of a gull came by and spooked this phalarope, and off it went, and we didn't have it. Although we did have kittiwakes there. This was up on the side of the cliff. And these across the way on this little island, this large colony of these kittiwakes and phalaropes and so forth that were out there. And this is that edge area there looking across there. So it just kind of gives you a sense of what the island is like. But one of the reasons we spent time here, because also down in these rocks right in front here is nesting areas for these guillemots. So these guillemots are down here feeding their young. So they're going out and catching these fish, coming back, kind of teeing up. And we got these really nice photographs of them while they were there. And just a group shot of everybody on the island. And the weather was perfect. We only had one day there, so the fact that the weather was really nice was a real bonus for us. So, what I want to do very quickly now is I'm going to show you a short video before we go to the last location, which is a lodge of our bird cliffs, which is where the puffins are. So this will just give you a little taste. So this is the Goddess Falls that I showed earlier, the large waterfalls. And then the geothermal area that I showed you near the Reykjavik Peninsula. And this is one of the groups of horses that we encountered. And again, we just happened to see this group just pull off the side of the road, and as soon as you approach the fence, the horses approach you. And then turn this down a little bit. This is what I was talking about just a little while ago with the harlequin duck. This is a female, and you can see how turbulent this water is. And this is actually the preferred habitat for harlequin ducks. They really like this type of real fast rushing water. That's the type of habitat they want as a duck. You think about, like mallards that we see here, little ponds and that sort of thing. That's not the type of habitat that these harlequins want at all. This is perfect for them. And you'll see in a minute, when it gets up on the rock, how large their feet are, and that's how they're able to kind of manage these turbulent waters and you'll see at one point she's going to scratch, and you'll see that foot go up with the size of the web of the foot. You'll get a sense of it here in a second. And you can hear that rushing water underneath her. And this kittiwakes here, this was actually in the spot where we had the killer whales. So there was a small kind of rock formation off the cliff there that had these kittiwakes all nesting in there. So again, just a little clip to just kind of give you an idea of some of the other habitats and so forth. So the last place that I'm going to take you to, and was really one of the real highlights of the trip, was to go to the Lochavar bird cliffs, and I have a video to close it out in a minute. So we were on Flate, as I told you. We took that ferry over, spent the day, took the last ferry out, and went across from Flate, and you end up right here to make your way out eventually to a lodge that's out here, then to eventually make your way to the bird cliffs, which are out here, just to kind of orient you. So, and this is the Lochavar cliffs here, which kind of run this gamut here, and it's one of the largest nesting colonies in the world for puffins and razorbills and a lot of these other cliff nesting birds. It's a real hot spot, a real tourist attraction, but it is really remote. I mean, really remote. This is where they drop you off, unlike where you leave, which is in a small village or town, which has some hotels and restaurants and that sort of thing. You get here, there is nothing. This is where they drop you. When you turn around and look here, that's what you see. That's it. So if you need something to eat or you need something to drink, you better get it now, because it's not like the 7-Eleven is down the road. You do not have an option until you get to the lodge. So this is the business card for the lodge, and you can go online and look this up as well. It's an interesting place. It was actually, I guess it was a school at one point. So this is the lodge that we stayed at. There's a couple different options in terms of your accommodations. The lodge itself has a very nice restaurant and a bar and common area where you can get drinks almost any time of the day and so forth. But that's the room you stay in. So I had the top bunk. Dr. Carl had the bottom bunk. We had one outlet. So if I needed to get out or he needed to get in, someone had to leave the room for that to happen. But we were just sleeping there, so it didn't matter. We were spending our time at the bird cliff, so that was fine. And like I said, the accommodations were actually quite nice, and the restaurant was very nice. And this is looking out the back window, kind of where we were staying. These are some other, I'm not exactly sure what we're going to call them, cabins or whatever. I guess these rooms are a little more spacious. If I went back, I would probably want to stay there. And this photo, again, was probably taken 11 o'clock at night, something like that. One of the things we learned pretty quickly is that in the morning when you get up and have this very nice breakfast was wonderful, is you pack your lunch from the breakfast, take some of the food with you to the cliffs, because the cliffs are a 45 minute drive away, and we didn't want to come back. As photographers, we want to spend the whole day, so we packed our lunch out from some of the food that they gave us for breakfast. This is arriving at the Lochavar Cliffs. This is the parking lot area. One of these two buildings, I'm not sure which one, was a bathroom. Unfortunately, when we were there, it was closed for renovations. So if anyone had to use a bathroom, you had to get in a vehicle and drive back about 10 or 15 minutes to where there was a small outhouse. But these are the cliffs, and depending on where you are on the cliffs, it could be 600 feet or more down, You've got a lot of nesting birds in here, including puffins right here. Here's some of the burrows. They have a series of picnic tables there. You can have a nice lunch, which we did. Really just fabulous. And again, we lucked out like we did at Flate. The weather for the most part was beautiful, and we only had one day here, so we were really lucky in that sense. And this just kind of was a sign that was there that I took of the Lochabar Bird Cliffs, and gives you a bunch of information about what takes place there. But kind of going up the cliffs, looking back, just to kind of give you a sense of scale and what's going on. So here's these huge cliffs with all these nesting birds. Up in this area here is where a lot of the puffins are and razorbills. Again, the parking area down here. And we really, from where we parked, we dropped all our equipment here, and we would just kind of work this cliff up and around to here. And that's the only area we went, which is about maybe 200 yards total. And you could have went, you could have walked for several miles, and we didn't do that. This is where we spent our time, because there was no reason to go anywhere else. And just my buddy Scott kind of looking back across to photograph some of the birds here. Again, just spectacular, beautiful. You can't believe it. The sounds of all the birds, really just quite incredible, which you'll see in a minute. There's my friend Dr. Carl and Nancy, and they're kind of zeroed in. You've got some kittiwakes down here that are nesting, and you can see they're nesting not only on the cliff, but kind of on the razor's edge here, right? There's not a lot of room for error here. So, and they only, for most of these birds, they raise one young. One young. So these are fairly long-lived birds. They raise one young. They have one chance to get it right each season. If it doesn't go well, they got to wait till next year. Here's some fulmars. Murres. Lots of murres. But these birds are down lower in the cliffs. They're not up on the edges like the puffins or the razorbills. But large numbers of them, and again, you can see they're just all tightly packed in there, and it's the sound, and it's really just unbelievable, just natural phenomenon to kind of be able to witness. It's one of these things you see it on TV and you think, wow, is that real? And then you go to a place like that and you experience it, and you say to yourself, wow, this is incredible. This actually does take place, and I'm viewing it, I'm seeing it, I'm photographing it, I'm hearing it. I converted it to black and white as well. I thought that was kind of interesting. Kittiwakes. Black-legged kittiwakes, and again, one young, that's it, Fulmars just kind of hitting the air, rising the air off the side of the cliffs. And you see them just as they're riding, they're just kind of floating. They're not flapping their wings, they're just kind of floating along. So what we would do is you just find one of your areas where you had something that kind of wandered up towards the edge. In many cases, it would be a razorbill and or a puffin, which you'll see in a minute. And these birds over time now, this is such a tourist attraction, they've become very habituated to the people that come there to see them and view them and photograph them and so forth. So there's no issue with these birds kind of viewing humans as this threat and so forth. So this razorbills and or puffins, people kind of, some people, think of them as like, the penguins of the north, right? There's no penguins, north, right? Penguins are in the southern hemisphere. So the difference is these birds can fly, penguins can't fly, right? So just a handful of photos of these razorbills. And again, I unfortunately only had one day. I wish I had more time there. And they're pair bonding at this point. So these birds, as far as the razorbills and the puffins, haven't actually nested yet. They're just, this is early July. They're about to start to nest. So now the puffins. So I don't know who this person is. I just like the photo because it gives you a sense of what's going on here. So along these upper edges here, occasionally, not more than occasionally, what happens is these puffins just kind of make their way up to the edge here. And in many cases, you could be standing in one of these places and there's no puffin. And you're just standing there, and all of a sudden a puffin just walks up over the edge and looks up at you. And then goes, okay, whatever, and off it goes. So in many cases, you can probably photograph it with your iPhone. But as a photographer in our group, we were interested in spending time photographing and recording video of these puffins. And so I'm just going to whip through just a whole series of photos of these puffins. And I have literally hundreds, if not thousands of these photos, and I've whittled out a lot of them. But you'll see some of the better ones here, and then I have a short video to show you. You get them, resting on rocks, and you get them in the grass, and you get a pair, and you get some nice flowers, and the lichens, and the ocean in the background. And again, the nice thing is you get there's the areas with the grass, so you can get them in the grass, not just on the rocks.
Now, on the book that I was reading, Shawn, in regard to puppets, they're on the menu of many restaurants.
So yeah, so they actually do eat puffins in Iceland, but it's not as common, I think, as it used to be. And in the areas that we went to, we did not see it on the menu, although you can run into it. They do also harvest the eggs in some areas. At this location, that is not done. That is not done. There are other places where it is done. I saw a minke whale on the menu at one restaurant when we were in Reykjavik. Other than that, but yeah, there are some places where it is actually on the menu. They are, there are a handful of birds that are real ambassadors for birds and for the attraction of birds and so on and so forth, and how they just kind of captivate people, owls and, birds of prey and that sort of thing. Well, a puffin is probably right up there, right? You can't show a photo of a puffin, I think, to anybody without someone looking at it and going, oh, look at the puffin, right? And it's not a very big bird. They're a fairly small bird, actually. And they're kind of have that comical, look to them and so forth, and they're just very captivating. It does have a little sad look to it, doesn't it? Yes, it does. And I have a handful of photos on my website. You can look at more of these photos and so forth. And again, just this nice area, just the variety in terms of photographer for the rocks and the grasses, and in some cases having the flowers in here, and just makes for a very interesting scenario in terms of the photography that you can get on these birds. And this is one of the burrows here. Didn't have many opportunities because again they weren't actually nesting at this point. They were kind of checking the burrows out. But this is one of the burrows back here, so it was kind of coming in and out of that burrow. And then so there was no young at this point, so it's not like they were bringing. See these classic photos of puffins with a bunch of fish in their beak. So none of that was going on. We were too early for that. And just a bunch of shots. You would sit there and you would take a series of photographs, and in many cases, it was waiting for something to happen. Open its mouth or open its wings up, and those are the type of photos I was looking to get. In this case, with the blue, this is the ocean in the background here. They had some nice warm light on them. Unfortunately, I was probably a little too close to this one when it opens wing. It's a little cramped for my take, but that's exactly how I shot it. It's not cropped at all. This is the cliffs in the background here with some of the other nesting birds as you're looking across. And so I'm going to show a video here in a second, which is kind of in the evening's program. I did take a GoPro camera with me, which I'm really into using GoPro now. Unfortunately, I didn't quite have exactly what I needed to get the footage I wanted. And so by using this little tripod, I was able to get some of the footage I want, but I had a kind of a whole different approach I would take if I went back again. This is as close as the cliff as I would get. I saw in some cases people sitting right up on the edge. I wouldn't do that because it's 600 feet down. And in fact, a few years before that, apparently a German tourist or photographer went right over the edge, and no more German tourist. But this was actually pretty typical. You could be sitting in any of these areas, and one of these puffins would just kind of walk up over the edge and just kind of sit there and look at you, and you'll see some of the footage in a minute. All right, so let me close out of this, and I will end by showing this short video. I did a time lapse, kind of a pseudo time lapse, at the very beginning, which you'll see in a second. So, Iceland, we're going to go to the Lachabar bird cliffs. This is July 7th when we were there. We spent basically the entire day there. So we're leaving the inn here. It's about a 40-minute drive. And I've sped this up, so you're not, but this is the whole drive. And you're thinking, why are you showing me the whole drive? I don't want to see a 40-minute drive. Well, I've sped it up. So we're not really going 90 miles an hour. In fact, you probably couldn't go this fast because I think you would probably blow your tires out. We're probably doing about maybe 20, 25 miles an hour, something like that. But the reason I'm showing this is just to show you how remote an area it is, first of all. This is a dirt road. Yes, this is a dirt road the whole way here. And it is remote. I mean, very remote. There's one very small village, and I use that word loosely, that we go through that you'll see in a minute, and there's one car that we overtake. But you can see, again, just the remoteness, the vastness of it, and so forth, the ocean off here to the right, and you'll see in some areas how it's straight down when we get closer to the cliffs. And I just found just the whole scenery here really just breathtaking in a way. And again, just this remoteness of it is not something that I've experienced much of in my lifetime, to be in a place like this. And you can see the cliff right down here, right? And a little switchback here coming up. And then we right by that vehicle. And so when we get down to this area down here, there's a small little village that we drive through, in a very large Arctic tern colony, which I'll point out in a second. But again, I just think this view from the camera now, unfortunately the GoPro is on the inside window, so that's why you see all these little wiggly lines. That's from the window. So this is a little village we go through. We didn't see any people there, but a couple of vehicles, so clearly someone was there. Then we get down to the end, this is the Arctic tern colony that was down here. And so we're making our way up over the other side here. The other side of that is where the bird cliffs are. Oh. So we're almost at the cliffs. So we got down, almost with the shoreline here. Although you'll see that that's going to change in a second. This is the outhouse there that if you needed to use a facility, you would have to go back to. And again, this right off the side of the road here. So Jim did a very good job driving. But eventually, as you'll see very quickly now, we're going to approach the cliffs, and then I slow it down to real time. Right about here.
But that's why they have these species have enormous.
What was the speed you were going there?
Right, that's about 20, 25 miles an hour. That's about as fast as you could go on that road.
You only have one job. You want to make sure all eyes are on them.
And so this is approaching the bird cliffs. This is the parking lot. Not many vehicles, although throughout the day you would have some tour buses and other things and large numbers of people coming in and out. And most people would stay for an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and leave. We spent the entire day. There was a handful of photographers that spent the entire day there, but most people didn't. And that's the area that we would traverse right here. This is all with my GoPro. So now I decided I'm going to take people on a little tour to kind of show them what it's like. So this is one of the tour buses that showed up, emptied out all the people up to the cliffs trying to get their pictures, right? These folks were there for about an hour. They left. This is, we dropped all our camera gear. You'll see right down here in this building, this little ledge. You can see it there. We just dropped our camera gear for the day, left it, no big deal, and we were just kind of in and out, photographing, having our lunch, so on and so forth. You'll see in a second here. I think there's a puffin that shows up. So here's my friend Nancy. She's got a puffin over here somewhere. And then this is my buddy Sam. You can see some of our gear here. And then behind Sam is my buddy Scott. And then behind Scott is Peter. That's Nancy's husband. And Peter's got 3 puffins over here. You can kind of see them right there that he's recording. So that now I'm getting video with my GoPro of the puffin. So this video is all with the GoPro. It's kind of an interesting view, I think. They're about that big. Not very big. No, they only come here to breed. That's it. They are on the ocean otherwise 24/7, other than when they come here to breed. I just love the view that the GoPro gives you to really show you what it's like to be at these cliffs. There's a fulmar flying by. Notice it's really not flapping, it's just gliding on the wind. Don't blink. Everyone watch the screen. Don't blink.
What was the name of that camera?
That's a GoPro. This is GoPro. This is what the surfers and the skiers and the mountain bikers use.
How do you spell that?
GoPro. GoPro.
GoPro?
Pro.
Pro.
GoPro.
Wow.
The camera is about, well, you saw the camera's about that big. But it gets you this really stunning video with this camera. You can't think a little camera like that can do it. I really like this view here, kind of looking up the side of the cliff, and you can see all the puffins back in here. And the conditions changed. It went from this nice sun to clouds to the wind picking up to some drizzle. But for the most part, we had really good conditions here. And because we only had that one day, we really felt like we lucked out in terms of the weather conditions. Nope, that's just one setting. That's it. It's just a wide angle. Now this is not on my GoPro. This is all with my big telephoto lens now. So the first part of it was just showing you the GoPro. So the GoPro just gets you that wide view. That's it. It's a fixed lens. And so you can, I'll try to turn this up a little bit. You can hear the sound of the birds in the background. You know I'm standing next to some other photographers. I like some of these views with the video as well. The photos are nice, but it's nice when you know, here's the ocean in the background, and it's nice and blurred out and so forth, but you can hear the waves, you can see that movement. I think it really makes for an interesting video to view it that way. Then again, down kind of lower mid area of the cliffs, these large concentrations of these murres down there. That's Iceland, folks.